Is the objection that you've got at the moment about citing about the size of the memorial, or would a plaque, without downplaying the whole thing, raise less objection? And I'm thinking down opposite McOrchard's.
Yeah, that's a good question. Where we're at the moment is still in the engagement stage with Hapu, and the feedback we've got so far is they're not against a memorial. They just wanted to be part of it right from the beginning, which on reflection was overlooked by myself and the runanga. So we're just working through those types of things, but we've heard all sorts of suggestions, you know, like downsizing, moving to other locations. So I don't know whether I've answered your question, but we're looking at all options.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Yeah, Councillor Tansos.
Thank you, first of all, for the presentation this morning. And I took all the Chair's comments and all the comments that have been made. And I think it is a really important kaupapa. So thank you for the work that you're doing to bring it forward. Yeah, I just wanted to pursue the question of the site a little bit, understanding that they may be sensitive and maybe don't want to talk too much at this stage. But in terms of, so what I've understood is that the site beside Te Hau Tutua Park is not going to be progressed. So is your preference for somewhere else along the river, or are you looking back to those other sites that you discussed earlier, or to the Wairere, Kaputarangi and that?
Kaputarangi, you cannot actually see Whakaari from up there. We walked that hill so many times trying to find a viewpoint. So that's pretty much out. And Otara Wairere has its challenges around traffic and things like that, and the escarpment, you know, there's history there of that not being stable anyway. So we potentially are looking to come back along the awa, but again, Hapu need to be engaged. So that's where we're at the moment. I can't give you, you know, probably anything more than that. Yeah.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming through to present. And it's still a sensitive topic, you know, within the community. But you're right, there is a lot of feedback from the community about when, not an if, when will we have a memorial. The following question was also about the site. But my question to you was, is this something that you would like us to talk about with our networks about a potential site, or should we not say anything and leave it to you as the steering group? Like, can we give you support, but we don't want to jeopardise anything?
Yes, we'd love your support, but Hapu's got to come first. Hapu and whānau got to come first. And then once we get a feel where they're at, then we'll come back and certainly appreciate any support you could give us.
All right, none of thanks.
Anyone else? Well, thank you very much for your presentation. You know, I think, as you're aware, we all feel really sensitively about this issue, and we just acknowledge the work you're doing and just ask you to press on, you know, until we get a result, because that will be just healing for all of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We appreciate being here.
Okay, so our next deputation will be the Kai Security Sector Research. So I'm going to ask Nikki Harnett to come up and introduce her fellow presenters to us. If you'd come and sit at the table, please. Just when you speak, press the button on the mics, at the base of the mics, till the light goes green. Thank you. All yours, Nikki.
Kia ora, I'm Nikki Harnett, and I am a Bay of Plenty local who is very passionate about growing and, of course, eating fantastic food. Last year, I was very privileged to be contracted to complete this Kai security sector report, and I see this report as the first step towards developing a Kai secure region that is thriving and resilient. I spoke to many amazing people and organisations during the course of the research, and I am lucky to have representatives of two of those here with me today. I've got Renee from Te Whatu Ora and Chris from Have a Heart Charitable Trust, who will also be speaking to you this morning. For context, I should probably have that. Is it this middle button, is it? Okay, so we'll go back to this. So, for context, food security is defined by the World Health Organization as when all people at all times have physical and economic access to sufficient, safe and nutritious food that meets their dietary needs and food preferences for an active and healthy lifestyle. So it would be hard to live in this country, or indeed the world, and not realise that food security is an important issue at the moment. We had COVID lockdowns that showed the vulnerability of our food supply chains, and then the subsequent cost of living crisis, which has made food harder to afford, even for working families who are now making up an increasing proportion of those seeking food support. The Kamakona report from Kore Hiakai, published last year, delved into the actual numbers of this, comparing incomes and cost of living statistics, and they found that it is definitely not an issue of poor budgeting. This is an issue of incomes not keeping up with the cost of living. So, and then in the latest New Zealand Health Survey, that was also published last year, that showed that 27% of our nation's children now live in households where food is often or sometimes running out. That's over a quarter of our nation's children. And for Māori and Pacific Islanders, that number's even higher, it's over 30%. Renee will speak a bit more shortly, just on some of the research they've done into the impacts on our early childhood, in an early childhood context. So if we add to these numbers the drastic reduction in funding from central government over the last 18 months, and things are getting even worse. The organisations that are helping these people in need are facing their own issues with reduced support, and some of them are faced with having to close their doors entirely. We've had two in the last 6 months, two large organisations, one in Auckland and one in Christchurch, who've had to resort to give a little campaigns just to keep the doors open and running their services. So with an increasing issue at national level, this report set out to find out the status of Kai security in our community after it had been shown to be an issue of great relevance and interest. So we've got food security that had been identified as a social sector focus area in the Community Wellbeing Project. Community gardens are showing up and featuring strongly in community plans that are being developed. Food security is a significant part of emergency management considerations, and food rescue, which forms a big part of the Kai security picture, plays a large role in minimising food waste and therefore carbon emissions. So we're looking at a big climate issue as well. I would like to now hand over to Renee to talk a bit more about their research into early childhood.
Morena koutou, ko Renee Bokoe tōko ingoa. I'm a health improvement advisor for the National Public Health Service, Te Manawataki, based in Rotorua, and we cover the Bay of Plenty. My mahi focuses on Kai, which includes supporting communities to create healthy food environments, and food systems that support well-being. Another part of my mahi focuses on working with councils and other stakeholders to build and maintain relationships to influence a health in all policies approach. I would like to start by acknowledging council's interest in the significantly important space and the work done so far. We want to support the findings of this piece of work and build on it to help those in the Whakatane district realize a more Kai-resilient future. Adding to the Kai Security Report, we recently conducted a Kai Security Survey to Early Learning Services, or ELSs, in the Whakatane district. The survey found 61% of lunchbox centers reported that tamariki do not bring enough food for meals and snacks. Food insecurity was prevalent in ELS across all socioeconomic levels. However, a higher need was identified for kohanga reo at 70% and ELSs with an equity index of 1 to 3, 1 indicating the highest need and 5 lowest need. When tamariki did not bring enough food from home, ELS staff reported topping up children's lunches to ensure they had enough. ELS staff often did this top-up using their own funds. Another key finding was that 1 in 5 centers reported they are in need of food donations or financial support to provide meals and/or snacks for tamariki. Over half were not aware of organizations that donate kai or fund ELSs. Key opportunities from the survey include ELSs could benefit from being connected to services, organizations, funding, and community to provide appropriate and equitable pathways for improving food security to ensure all tamariki have adequate nutritious food. In addition, ELSs were interested in sustainable long-term support measures to support Kai security. The findings from our survey highlights concerning factors and aligns with the broader Kai Security Report's recommendations and opportunities. To support long-term actions that consider factors such as climate change and emergency response, a collaborative, coordinated approach is essential. This approach aims to achieve a sustainable local food system, ultimately leading to improved health and well-being outcomes for our communities. Ngā mihi kia koutou, and back to you, Nikki.
Thanks, Renee. So through initial discussions, it was determined that the best place to start our research was at the coalface, talking to the social organisations who deal with Kai security issues on a daily basis. Then we decided, what do we want to know? And that was, how are our people and our social organisations coping at a local level? What challenges are they facing? What are the issues that are bringing people through the door? And what can be done to best support both the organisations themselves and the people they serve? After deciding on a series of questions, an online survey was developed and sent to the social organisations, and there was also an option of an in-person interview. There was an 86% total response rate, which we thought was pretty good. The answers were then collated and analysed to identify patterns and to highlight important feedback. Additional supporting information was also gathered from national sources, and that included funding information from MSD. There were a number of key themes across the responses, and it was great to see so many different organisations on the same page when it came to identifying these issues and opportunities. So we split the responses effectively into barriers and opportunities, and then split into what people are facing individually and as families, and how the organisations are coping. So in terms of barriers, to Kai security in our communities. The most common response, unsurprisingly, was the cost of living crisis, and also the loss of basic life skills was a very common response. So things like gardening, cooking, and even being able to identify healthy food options is becoming a skill that's limited in our communities. Also noted was the stigma attached to accessing food support services and limited knowledge around who qualified for what services, especially where services were new or had undergone changes. We also had repeated feedback from social organisations that they were only hearing about people in need through word of mouth. It was caring neighbours or community members who'd noticed that maybe people were going without but not actually reaching out for help, that perhaps their neighbour had their grandkids for the school holidays and there wasn't quite enough food to go around. So we can only assume from this that there are so many more people out there who are going without support completely. Organisations themselves are also facing their own cost of living crisis of sorts, constantly facing a funding battle with valuable resources dedicated just to getting enough funding in the door to keep their services running. Lack of consistent funding was also highlighted, with at least one organisation no longer able to provide the food parcels that they could 2 years ago, and others having to introduce new income streams or operational models. When it came to opportunities that exist to address the barriers faced, responses were again consistent in terms of what could help our people, and that was education. Knowledge is power, and the knowledge and resource to grow, hunt, forage and prepare your own food is like money in your pocket. However, much of our community does not have the skills that many previous generations had. Even reliable access to kitchen facilities to cook or store food is a huge issue when there is a housing crisis at play and people are suffering from overcrowding. They might be living in vehicles and just not have that access to basic kitchen facilities. Cooperation between social organisations and the potential for resource sharing stands out as a big opportunity for improvement within the social sector, with multiple organisations all searching for funding, food sources, volunteers, storage spaces and other resources. It would be beneficial to have at least some centralised support to spread the load and reduce duplication of effort. There is also the potential to centralise assets that individual groups may not be able to afford alone, and to place combined bulk orders with food suppliers to achieve the required quantities for wholesale rates. After taking all of these matters and more into consideration, 3 short-term recommendations were made in the report, with one of those encompassing many of the opportunities identified. 2 of the easiest to implement would be a campaign to advertise food support options to the public, making it easier to understand what is available. And this would tie in with what Renee was saying about the early learning centres. They just don't know what support is available. Ideally, this would also be done in a way that could reduce the stigma around accessing those services. Coordinated advocacy for the reinstatement of appropriate levels of funding to the organisations would also be beneficial. But both of these are effectively dealing with ambulances at the bottom of the cliff. So to help at the bottom of the cliff while also starting to build a fence at the top, the recommendation is to create a regional Kai security coordinator role, or ideally a number of roles with different focus areas to best utilise skills and experience. This has been done successfully in the Western Bay of Plenty through their Mana Kai Mana Order program, and there are other similar programs throughout the country.
You've got 2 minutes left.
A couple of paragraphs. So the Kai Security Coordination Program, while supporting social organisations that provide emergency food support, would also deal directly with the public, helping them with education and supporting existing and future Kai security spaces. So before I run out of time, I'd like to hand over to Chris to just briefly speak about his organisation's experience with Kai Security.
Good morning. I'm Chris Barnard and I'm the founder of Have a Heart Charitable Trust, and we've been in this food sector, if you like to call it, since COVID. We established a distribution of food during that time, and as Nikki has presented in her report, those are the main challenges that we are faced in terms of distributing food, because funding has stopped. We have to find ways of how we would generate money to keep our doors open. We are one of 65 food distribution centres in New Zealand, and we primarily get our foods from New Zealand Food Network. So we've had to become quite innovative to try and keep the doors open of providing food. every day we see an exponential growth of need in our community. What we have done to be able to keep our doors open, we now provide affordable food for our community, the small percentage who are living on the benefit. We have, though, found that a larger percentage of people who are middle class are now coming to get food. What we've done to recreate ourselves is we source food from wherever we can at cost price. The difficulty, obviously, is being able to afford and buy food in bulk. We just don't have those resources. But we have a select group of groceries that we provide in our little pantry shop, or whatever you want to call it. And for every $10 that a person spends, they can choose 3 free items. On average, people are buying roughly $40 worth of food. That allows them then 12 items for free, and they leave with a trolley basket full of food to the value of average $100. So it is something crucial, but we need the collaboration. We need a central hub. We need someone to help us find food. How can we get food? We don't have that administrative hub strong enough to do all of that. So I just want to second the proposals that have come forth. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Just to close, I'd like to say thank you to Whakatane District Council for funding and supporting this project. This is such an important topic nationally, but to have support for the work to do this at ground up from community level is so important to the long-term success of kai security initiatives and will no doubt result in better outcomes for the community. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. Questions from the councillors, please. Councillor Puller.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Thanks for that presentation. I don't envy your task. I've got several questions, really. And what if you weren't there? What would happen? What would people do? Is it I mean, and you've touched on it, education's the key, really, and education's probably the fence at the top of the cliff and the food parcels are the ambulance at the bottom, and so we're always talking about building the fence. So do you reach out into people's homes? And I know people don't, that's all the privacy stuff and that, but how do you get families to make lifestyle changes, I suppose? Because that's what it is in some ways, isn't it? That you have to rethink your whole lifestyle. If you can't afford to have pets or smoke or whatever else you do, then how do you get into that realm, really, of people thinking about those sort of things rather than just, oh, I'll go and get a food parcel?
There's been a lot of success with programs like Garden to Table in schools. The school garden programs are very, very popular, and you see that kids are taking this stuff home. There's a fantastic example in Te Puke with the Giggles Early Childcare Centre. They've got their entire a corner of their backyard that is just producing food. So that goes home to the families, and they can show them how to eat it, and they've got a pātaka kai out the front of their centre that all their surplus food goes into, or it goes to food banks or so forth. So I think starting with the kids is a really good start point, especially for the long term. I don't know if Chris has got some other thoughts.
I think the greatest challenge is how do we serve the innocent children? How do we provide for them? Because if we suddenly disappear and we no longer have food hubs to provide for food, it's the children who suffer the most. But it's by collaboration, our community, our business sector, all our social service providers, the council, government, that could make things better. And of course, as you mentioned, education, how do we change the culture? rather than giving handouts and people becoming dependent. That's really what we don't want. We want people to be able to be educated, to find a way. How do they budget better? How do they spend their money better? When people are caught up in spending money on other things rather than food, how do we support people who are caught up in those type of vices, if you'd like to call it?
Because that's a challenge, isn't it, if I may?
Huge
continue.
challenge.
One more,
And
Councillor
the children are the pawns, really, and so are we in danger of taking over the parental responsibility by doing what we're doing? And do we have to rethink some of that ourselves, maybe?
That is the danger, the dependency. And that's what we saw during COVID. We definitely created a dependency, and you saw the same people every week. But what I've discovered is when you allow people to pay for their food, they no longer come as a beggar, but they come with dignity, and you maintain their dignity because they're not getting the food free anymore. The problem for us who provide the food is how can we keep it affordable so that people can still have substantial meals. that they
Okay,
can.
Deputy Mayor Amink.
Thank you, Mr Chair, and thank you very much for your presentation. I've got a couple of questions. The first one is, in terms of bulk buying, we have the social supermarket here in Whakatane. Can they bulk buy on behalf of all the other organisations?
That would be something to explore, but that also limits you to one supplier. So from the conversations I've had with Have a Heart, there are avenues to go directly to suppliers of things like grains and flours and things like that and purchase in bulk. But because of the scale that individual organisations are working at, they just can't quite get to the bulk where they can get those wholesale rates. And you're not going to get those wholesale rates going directly to the supermarkets.
If I could just answer that, New Zealand Food Network, they do a lot of bulk buying, not just food rescuing, but they also do bulk buying, and they look for foods at certain prices. The biggest problem, again, which we refer to this presentation, is in Whakatane we work as silos,
Yes.
and we need to bring people together so that what you asked, that we do work together and buy bulk food for a central food provider.
Right, thank you. And that actually leads on to my second question. Are you essentially asking for council to fund this role?
Not necessarily. We've already spoken to the likes of Bay Trust. I know in the Western Bay it was a collaboratively funded approach, and Bay Trust have already said they'd be happy to get the other funders in the region together to look at funding this sort of role. Obviously, council sits in a good position to be able to support this kind of role, whether that is funding or whether it is other kinds of support, that remains to be determined.
Thank you.
Councillor Tansos.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Thanks for the presentation today. I think this is a really important issue, and of course not just in terms of growing poverty and inequality in our country, but also the challenges of climate change, which are going to create, I think, food insecurity increasingly. And I think it's important to tie the question of food security with food sovereignty as well, which you've kind of done. So I think it's a really important piece of work, and I see the importance of a coordinator role to avoid people working in silos in the way you've said. I was thinking about, there's some really good work done around gardens in schools and community gardens where having a coordinator can be the critical thing that allows those things to really work, where otherwise you've got teachers struggling to kind of hold things together when it's not really necessarily their skill set. Or so a coordinator that can work across different community gardens and schools is really important, and maybe that could be part of the role. I was really interested in the point about, it talks about non-economic orchards and things where And there's something I'm interested in. I think there's a lot of people growing a lot of food in our district where they're not necessarily at a commercial level. They may have enough to share, but I think there's a lot of food that gets wasted. And so if it was possible to kind of collect all that food up and make it available, I think it's a huge amount of resources available there. So I was just interested in if you had any further thoughts about that, because that came through as one of the key points in your report.
Yeah, that is something we've discussed, and I've even discussed it with some of the social organisations that do have potential manpower to go out and harvest some of those crops. And I think that's where having a coordinator that can talk to the people who've got the excess fruit or have the uneconomic orchards. I mean, we hear about avocados that, are just dropping on the ground because it's not viable to harvest them. And not only having the ability to go out and get those, but then having the avenues to distribute that. And that's where the social organisations are in a really good position. They've got those existing avenues. But then if we can do things like have kitchen facilities that we can then teach people how to process that fruit. I know in Kawerau they are doing that at the old intermediate school. They've got the kitchen set up and they bring people in to process the fruit from their food forest and sources like that. So yeah, that's definitely a really good option.
Thank you.
Councillor Rangiaho.
Hai, kia ora koutou. Nā mihi atu ki a koutou po tēnei whakaatirana ki a tātou. Acknowledgement to you, Chris. We have a wonderful couple up in Muripara. That's Jamie and JD Delamere, who actually is part of the service that you provide within our community. Probably one of the questions was, you did raise it around the success rates of some of the programs that are held inside of the school. In terms of that, is that something that, to fine-tune on a research, it's of the things that really work well and the things that kind of don't, so you've got a more clear understanding of where those where provisions can be handed out, because you are working with a whole lot of organisations who's also trying to get this funding, and you have this kind of competitiveness going on. Would that coordinator or central coordinator be focused from here because of our region, because we go right out inland, and how would that work, or how would you be able to manage, what would that role look like for that person?
I think that's where it would be really good to have perhaps a couple of roles that work together. So maybe there is someone who focuses on logistics and bulk purchasing, and there is someone who works with community gardens and school gardens and has that horticultural background. So we did have participation from some of those outlying areas, and some of they do get food rescue from other regions as well, just because of proximity and geography. So it would be the ideal that role would travel and would still support those outlying areas where they wanted support. One thing they raised is that they felt it was important that people came and spoke to them before starting any new programs, which we think is really important. They're already out there doing the mahi.
Some amazing work. Here they are.
Yeah.
Okay, Councillor Isles, and then we need to wrap this up.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, presenters. Very interesting and a very, very diverse and extensive subject that you've brought to the table this morning. I go back some years to the involvement with the Taneatua Community Garden and with Chris Barnard, which was set up with Honey and Tamiana Thrupp. And that garden is still thriving to this day. This garden is still producing, and this time of the year, as has already been mentioned, there's apples by abundance that are there in the garden to be taken home and utilised. We also have another orchard, community orchard in Taneatua. Again, basically fruit trees and what have you, planted there for community participation and to harvest. The hardest part, I find, and it comes back to your coordinator role that you speak of, is getting the participation, getting the families involved, getting the children to understand what a cabbage is, or, you know, what a pear is, and how they're grown and what have you. So again, if I may, I chair the Keep Whakatane Beautiful Committee. We have an annual garden competition. I would love to have some buy-in from you, Nikki, if I could, so that we can promote that, hopefully do an education program, because for the last couple of years, in the best junior garden, we're lucky to get 2 entries. In the school garden, we only get the high school entries. Whakatane and Trident as a rule. So, and Allendale is another school that is frequently entered. But we would like to think that we could possibly liaise with you and do some sort of an educational program to see if we can increase that input. Thank you.
Councillor Boynton, sorry, did you have a question? Yes. Quickly.
Thank you for your presentation. Good to see you, and for the mahi that was done, and mahi to you, Chris. Good to see you again. I had a question was around when you talk about those who are working in silos, does that also include our social services? Have you been a part of working alongside them? Because at the moment, the 4 wellbeings may be removed from council, which probably might make it harder in terms of having certain support towards this kind of kaupapa. So I wanted to know, you know, is there work being done with social services who may already have a similar kind of role?
Chris might be able to talk better to this soon, but we did find that there was some relationships between those social organisations, but it was often 1 or 2, and it wasn't necessarily a functional working, like sharing resource kind of relationship. And there doesn't appear to be anyone who is sort of covering all the bases that we suggest that this coordinator could do, because they simply don't have the resource to do it. I don't know, Chris, whether you've got some more thoughts on.
I think that's quite a significant question. We have, over the last 2 years, worked collaboratively with church groups and with iwi groups and social service providers who refer people to our food hub. So there is quite a big form of collaboration. I think the biggest issue is that with our social service providers, because of the funding that's scarce, we all want to hold on to our funding, and there's a certain amount of fear of collaboration, because when we collaborate, we have to pool our funds together. And how do we manage that? That again, bringing together a group of people that will work together on a central hub would probably be quite a good advantage. One of the reasons we started the Heart to Heart Expo and Family Festival was to bring the social services together, where we can start talking to one another, presenting what we do to our community.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Nikki, Renee and Chris, and we just appreciate the work you're doing in this area. It's obviously very needed, and the sad thing is it looks like it's getting worse, but hopefully there can be an answer found for it eventually. Thank you very much. Okay, councillors, we're now moving on to the confirmation of minutes. We have, for the Living Together Committee, we have a set of public excluded minutes and a set of public minutes. So I'm interested, has anyone got any queries for the 14th of November public excluded? Otherwise, we'll do them together. Is there any queries for that public excluded set of minutes? There is not. So then I'll call for a mover and a seconder that the public and public excluded minutes of the Living Together Committee meetings held on the 14th of November 2024 and the 5th of December 2024, the public meeting be confirmed as a true and correct record. Is there a mover for that? Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Puller. Is there a seconder for that, please? Councillor Rangiaho. No debate on that public meeting minutes? No. All in favour say aye. Against and carried. Going on to item number 7, the Community Board recommendations and minutes. We're going to call for a mover and seconder soon that the following minutes be received. The Community Funding Committee for the 5th of November 2024. The Whakatania Hopi Community Board, 18th of November 2024. The Murupara Community Board, 19th of November 2024. The Rangataiki Community Board, 27th of November 2024. Taniatua Community Board, the 2nd of December 2024. The Murupara Community Board for the 10th of February 2025. The Whakatania Hopi Community Board for the 10th of February 2025, and also the Youth Council for the 13th of February 2025. Do I have a mover for that, please? Thank you, Councillor O'Brien. A seconder? Thank you, Councillor Tansos. Is there any debate? Those in favour for receiving these reports, say aye. Aye. Against, and carried. Thank you very much. Moving on to the reports, item number 8, we are going to the Better Off Funding report. I'd like to invite General Manager Lenny Wolseley and also Pearl to the table, please, to present on that. Lenny, you're by yourself.
Looks like it, yes. Right, it is me today. Morena koutou, thank you for...
This is on page 15 to 21, folks.
Thank you. So I'm bringing to you today the 6 monthly Better Off Funding report for the period July-December 2024. As you'll see from the paper, we've made significant progress across the 7 remaining Better Off Funding programs that were approved by the DEI funding in 2023. There are 5 that are still in flight, and the report details progress for those. I'll take the report as read. We have staff in the room who can answer any specific questions around how these Better Off funding projects are tracking. So opening the floor for any questions.
So obviously for the councillors' benefit, there is an extra page being added into from the original agenda, and that is between page 17 and page 18, we've missed out the page for Collective Iwi Policy Hub and also Natural Hazard Resilience, and that was included in your up-to-date or agenda that was published last night. So any questions? I have a question to start with. You've got 2 that state that your, where is it? Honahapuri Community Outreach for Council Services. It says you've got a remaining $162,951. Also for the CCTV upgrade, you've got $162,951 remaining. So they're both the same. So I did my little sums. Could you change the Honahapuri one to $150, $150,012, please?
Thank you, Councillor Dennis. We'll make that change.
Okay. Any other questions? Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Good morning, Lainey. Thank you for the report. Just with those that have got either the 30th of June 2025 and or the Honahapuri one, 31st of December, so what's the consequence if those funds are not all spent in that time frame?
So we're currently working through with the DIA what the process will be if any funds have to be returned. The programme manager is confident that with that one in particular, although the project has completed, the funding won't need to be returned for Honahapuri. The CCTV one, I think, will be... Was that the CCTV one you asked?
You've got the southern districts, and then you've also got building civil defence capability.
So the southern districts one, we do expect to spend the total by the expected completion date. And what was the other one, sorry?
The building civil defence capability, 400,000.
Again, although we were hoping to complete by June this year, we do expect that the actual completion of the build itself will roll over into the next financial year, but we won't be expected to pay that back.
All right, just the concern that I have is that when we received NZTA funding for the streets project, the pilot, we received 400,000, we only spent 200,000, we had to give it back.
Yeah.
This is $1 million effectively. that we've worked hard on. We don't want that to have to go back to Treasury.
No, and it is something that the team are really conscious of. They are talking, as I said, quite closely with DIA. What we have noticed, although they haven't mentioned having to pay any money back, what we have noticed is there is an increased level of scrutiny over how the invoicing is being tracked, which actually is a really positive thing because it's just creating an expectation that they are closer to the projects and making sure that we're running on track. But we're keeping them really well informed. We're navigating those invoicing processes and making sure that they are getting all the information they need. But there hasn't been any mention yet of paying money back. We've got some really good logic for any that have extended past the early timeframes that were anticipated. And at this point, there's confidence that we'll be able to spend the money within a time that's acceptable to DIA.
So essentially, we've got 2.5, 3 months, because we don't want to get to June and then find out.
Yeah, so our understanding is they're not going to come to us at the end of June and say, right, anything unspent is coming back right now. There is a degree of flexibility. These dates are still our target completion dates, but they aren't a date that DIA has imposed to say if it isn't spent by then, it has to be returned.
Right, thank you.
I have a question, please. Sorry, I missed that in. I have a question, please. On the Thornton to Edgecombe Awa Trail, there is a lot of concern about, is there a amount of money put aside for maintenance?
Yes, and that has come up in some of our hapu engagement as well. So the Cycleways team who are looking at that are intending to work with Transport team for the following financial year to ensure that the actual maintenance can be covered in our BAU transport funding. At the moment, given that stage 1 is completed and stage 4 is completed, but those middle 2 sections of Thornton to Edgecombe are not likely to be completed for some months to come, the budget that we're going to need to be able to do that is actually very minimal, but it is something that the Transport team and the Cycleways project management team are working out, and we'll make sure that it is fully budgeted in the next annual plans.
I think you need to start before then, that you're getting residents going out there trying to cut back and trying to spray the track, because the kaikuya is growing across from both sides on one sector of Tanakaha Street off there, and so it's a lot of angst in the community that it seems to be getting covered. So in days gone past, that trail was mowed, I think it was. So we're not doing that now. Why can't we just take the same amount of money put aside for the main and do it for spraying the edges?
I'll definitely check up on what the plan is for the immediate maintenance, and if that's coming through from the community, we can check with the teams that would be responsible for the mowing and the trimming of the vegetation.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Tanzos, did you have a...
Yes, I do, thank you. Just on the collective iwi policy hub, it says that ongoing discussion with the governance group is centred around ensuring the hub's sustainability beyond DIA funding. I was just wondering how promising those discussions are looking.
Might hand over to my colleague Michelle Hingston on that one, thank you.
Yeah, so it's looking good. What they're planning to do is essentially be a stand-in environmental unit for the iwi if they so wish, and that will require external funders. So MFE has signalled that they are keen. We'll probably go to regional council, and they'll probably look at district council and our other projects going on internally to ensure that funding will ensure its longevity. Yeah.
Councillor Pollock, please.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Lainey, just talking about CCTV, has that played an important role in the recent activity that's been going on?
Yes, in fact, I was quite surprised at the level of interaction between some of our external agencies and the programme that we have put in place with the CCTV upgrades, and just the amount of interaction there and the benefit that is providing the community. I didn't know that. So I've only recently learned that about this programme and the additional support that is providing, particularly police, obviously, and they do actually request access to some of that footage quite regularly. What's the question?
It was, it's been value for money, I guess, is
Yes.
what I'm asking.
That's certainly my understanding, and it will continue to be. What we are going to be following up with is a CCTV policy. So you might remember in the strategy and policy work programme that was developed the early stages, and then it was put on hold until the project had been completed and the infrastructure was in place, so that then we can actually look at how best to make sure that that is done really well going forward. But yeah, my understanding is it's been a success.
Thank you.
Thank you. No more questions or clarification. So on page 15, the recommendation is that the Living Together Committee receive the Better Off Funding Program Update Report. Is there a mover for that, please? Thank you, Deputy Mayor Imick. Seconded by Councillor Boynton. Those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you very much, Lainey.
Thank you.
We're going to now move on to the road naming proposals report. Chris King Hazel and Annalise Reynolds.
Morena koutou. In starting, I'd just like to I need to make a couple of amendments to the first paragraph of section 4.1.4, 685 Wainui Road, page 26. Just amending, recommended by Wiki Mooney, a local kaumātua, and also the addition of Te Uru Taumatu chairperson and the supported by, and also in the supported by the inclusion of Te Runanga o Ngāti Awa to be added. I take my report as read, but please note that you will see we're proposing the road naming of 7 private roads and 1 public road. You will note that all these applications were received during the period that the road naming and addressing policy was being reviewed, but they all follow the principles of the reviewed policy. So any questions?
Questions, please, councillors. Okay, I'll make a start. In regard to Burma Rise, I noticed you saying there that they didn't really want to have the road name, but we've insisted because there's more than 5 houses up there. Yes. So why aren't we insisting that the road sign goes up?
I think that's an option. I don't think that's mandatory that a sign needs to be put in place. We've tried to accommodate the request by putting the recommendation Burma Rise rather than having a totally different name. And you will note that one of the standards recommends you don't have roads of similar names, but we feel this won't be an issue due to the fact that generally that road will only be used by the residents that live up there. Burma Rise Emergency Services would know the location locally, so we don't see it as a huge issue.
I don't have an issue with that. I was just wondering why we didn't insist they put the road sign up. And it goes along with the Mimiha Ridge and Mimiha Ridge Road. The fact they're next to each other actually helps you work out where on earth they are. My second question is Panikaha Road, going along with that line of that we insist that if you have more than 5 houses, you have to have a public road. So that Panikaha only goes a third of the way into the property, and there's more than 5 houses up that road that aren't serviced by it. Or is that relying on the fact that there's access ways? Because if you look at 65D, 65E, and 65C, they don't seem to have any connection to, I see there's tracks in there. So why isn't Panikaha meant to go up all the way? Or is that just not an issue? That's on page 35.
This is the one off Wainui Road.
Yeah. We have to go
Yeah, we might have to come back to you on that one, Chair. I believe it's part of a subdivision. This one is quite a historical one, the one off Wainui Road, so we may need to come back to you.
I just find that interesting. If we're insisting on a public road, why aren't we insisting that some of those other two tracks, especially the one that goes right up to the back block on the left, and also the one that goes up to 68.5E, why they aren't made to be public roads too? Because they're accessing properties that haven't got access to a public road. Now, I'm quite happy with the fact that the rules don't insist on that. I was just curious.
Through the chair, I think I understand where you're coming from now. So the naming is of the area of land that is already public road. The tracks that exist on some of those other properties aren't public road or private road. They're part of their own individual titles. So the naming has come about because of the multiple subdivisions that have happened. That's triggered the need for a name to be given, but it doesn't trigger the need to force other pieces of land to become road reserve. That was resolved as part of the subdivision.
Excellent answer, thank you. Yeah, no more questions? No. Councillor Tansis.
Actually, it's not really a question, but just it's nice to actually have one of these come up before us and it not be controversial. and it's great to learn some history. Panikaha it's great to learn a bit of Wainui history. So thank you.
I especially go along with the idea of Roberta Lane. I used to know the lady, just the loveliest lady you'd ever want to meet. Okay, let's go to the proposal then on page 22. The recommendation is that the road naming report be received, and number 2, that the Living Together Committee approve the private road name of Roberta Lane for the subdivision of 30D Melville Road, and number 3, that the Living Together Committee approve the private road names of Kahu Lane, Uru Rise and Rangipari Lane for the subdivision of 220 Withy Road. Number 4, that the Living Together Committee approve the private road name of Iramoko Lane for the subdivision of 230 Withy Road. Number 5, that the Living Together Committee approve the public road name of Panikaha Road for the subdivision of 685 Wainui Road. Number 6, that the Living Together Committee approve the private road name of Kerarutahi Road for the subdivision of 100 Stanley Road. And number 7, that the Living Together Committee approve the road name of Burma Rise for the subdivision of number 10 Burma Road.
Move.
Councillor O'Brien. Yep. Moved. Seconded by Councillor Boynton. Is there any debate?
Just through you, Mr. Chair, not so much debate, but I'd just like to congratulate the team because this is a lot of, and there's been a bit of controversy in the past. I think this is a reflection on the work you've done because you've obviously been in touch with a lot of the iwi and the hapu. So all credit to you and thank you for that.
Thank you, Councillor.
Any more debate, Councillor Isles?
Thank you, Chair. Again, it's so nice to see all the subdivision work coming through and hopefully increasing our rating base as we go along the way. I would like to think that hopefully coming back to infrastructure and planning will be possibly development contributions which may go towards sealing, especially up in this Withy Road subdivision where it's been a tricky bit of road for many, many years, and with the intended subdivision that's going to take place there, I'd like to think that there will be something. Also, the other issue I have is the maintenance of our roading signs. Can we have a report back at that at some stage as well, just to let us know where or how we do upgrades or maintain? A lot of the signs, in my observation around the district, are that overgrown and moss and what have you, you can barely read them. So for out-of-towners coming to town, it is an issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Isles. Is there any more debate on the actual subject? If there be none, those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you very much, ladies, for your report. We are going to adjourn for morning tea for 15 minutes and be back here at 10:30. Thank you very much. Okay, councillors, welcome back to our Living Together meeting. Due to staff availability, we're going to bring forward item 8.4, which is the adoption of the Diversity, Equity and Inclusion Policy. So could I please ask Karen Summerhay, Ayla and Emlyn to come forward, if Emlyn's presenting, or is it just Karen and Ayla? Thank you. Page 54.
Good morning, councillors. Thank you for having us here today. We're very excited to be able to present to you an opportunity to deliberate on the submissions for the Diversity, Equity and Inclusion Policy and to present to you a draft policy for adoption today after you've deliberated. I believe that's the way it's going to go. So I will present the report. I'll take it largely as read, but there were some alterations that we thought we would highlight in the new policy, just to make sure that you are aware of those. So we will, also I'd just like to point out that at the briefing, we had a request to engage with youth more deeply, which we undertook on the 24th of February, and that's on page, the response of that is on page 3 of your report. They largely agreed with the policy. They gave us thumbs up and lots of nods. So I think we felt the policy was supported by the Youth Council. So with regard to your track change document that you have in front of you, section 4.3 of your report provides an update to the, getting there, to the Education and Awareness Initiatives section of the policy, and just to highlight that we have added a point in that policy about building understanding of DEI in our communities, which is largely just directing us to help educate. On the 7.3 in your policy, page 4 of your report, we've reworded section 7.3.1 for clarity for a rewording. And on 7.3.3, we've included enhance and maintain our physical environment to accommodate all accessibilities. 7.4 in accessibility, there was a 7.4.1 was removed because it was duplicated in another policy. 7.4.3 is a new addition, and this is providing opportunities for accessible sensory environments and equipment, and this was a direct response to a number of submissions around how our playgrounds and open spaces could be more accessible and encouraging to our whānau. And then lastly, just about lastly, 7.5 in the policy, we have added a principle of applying the nothing about us without us principle, and that was also a very strong message through the submissions. And then just lastly, really in the general comments and just some notes, we've updated the definition of diversity to be clearer. And that's on page 8 of your track change document. And we've added a definition of nothing about us without us on page 9. And in the final document, we have the intent of moving the definitions to the beginning of the document. We didn't do it because it was going to mess up the numbers, but it seems to make the document flow better if it was at the beginning. So other than that, we're now in your hands, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Karen. Any questions of clarification, please?
Thank you.
Now, because we went through this document in a briefing, public briefing, we actually need now to deliberate before we move and debate it. So we're going to open the floor now to deliberations. So would folk like to deliberate on the submissions and some of the changes that have been made to it, please? Have anyone got any comments or deliberation?
They make perfect sense to me. And it's good to see that, feedback has been taken on board and, we've made those revisions. So, yeah, well done.
Councillor Tansos, then Councillor Boynton.
First of all, thank you for this huge piece of work. I think it's really important, it's really great. And we've spent quite a lot of time chewing it over at briefings and things. So it's nice to kind of be at the final hurdle. Very minor question. I noticed in the track change it talks about disabled people rather than people with disabilities. I've got used to saying people with disabilities. Is this the how we talk?
Yes, that was on advice from the Ministry for Disabled People.
Right.
That the language is that.
Okay.
And until such time as language changes, it's likely to stay that.
Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Boynton.
Kia ora. He mihi anō, mō tō mahi nunui. So just also to acknowledging the massive amount of work that you've done, but also to from recalling its first development, also the hui that we had here when whānau came in, and then that agreement and that commitment happening, and ka puta mai ngā hua. And these are the fruits that have been produced today. Really, I wasn't really deliberating anything, I just wanted to mihi to the mahi, and thank you so much.
Anything else from anyone? Okay, no one wants anything changed from that final copy and for the differences that have been made. In that case, we're going to go to page 55 and go through the recommendations. That the Living Together Committee receive the adoption of the Diversity, Equity and Inclusion Policy report, and that number 2, that the Living Together Committee receive the draft and revised version of the Diversity, Equity and Inclusion Policy, in particular Appendix C, D and E. And number 3, that the Living Together Committee receive the written submissions and deliberate on the draft Diversity, Equity and Inclusion Policy. And that number 4, that the 4A, that the Living Together Committee adopt the revised Diversity, Equity and Inclusion Policy. Is there a mover for that, please? Thank you, Councillor Duke. Second.
I'll move 4A.
Yep, we've just mentioned that.
No, it's either or.
I actually went through and said we're going to go to 4A because there's been no changes. Yeah, there've been no change.
Yes, I'm happy to move that.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Tansos. Is there any debate at all? Just mention that we had either A or B, depending on what happened in deliberations, as to whether or not we challenge anything and want something changed. But there were no changes, so we're going to go with 4A as I have read out. Thank you. Any debate? You wanted to say something, Madam? Okay. Everyone in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against and carried. You want to say something?
Yeah, I just really want to acknowledge all of the people that have participated in developing this policy, right through from the people who engaged in the ethnic research, into the focus groups, to the people who put in submissions, to the many agencies that have provided us professional support. And Ayla's got to say.
Just wanted to acknowledge and thank you all for your support of this kaupapa and the policy. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I can just say something quickly. Ana tēnei te mihi atu ki tētahi o ngā wahine tuahi aku nei whakaro. Ko tōna inga ko Poihare Morris. E hia ngā wai hara mai ia a tinana. Tangata he wahine noho pūmau ki tēnei miki tēnei kaupapa. So ahakoa e harai wainganui a tātou a tinana, kei kare kore kei kone ia a wairua. Te tautoko, te kitea tēnei taonga I tāko ango mai koutou. So just to acknowledge Poihare Morris, who used to come and advocate for this policy to be passed, And just to remember her for the time she used to come. She's not here in person, but no doubt she's here in spirit. And she'd be very appreciative of the work that you guys have done in getting this across the line. So that's all I have to say. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Just the last word, Karen and Ayla, I just want to thank you. This is a major, major piece of work. And I think one can appreciate the efforts you went to by the fact you found a group in our community of 200 Kerala people, which I was just stunned as. And for able to include all persons into this and all groups, I think it's just a massive effort from you. So congratulations to you both. Thank you very much. Thank you. So let's go back to, let's go back to 8.3, the Forestry Block Report. So Georgia and Ian Maloney, please. On page 43.
Kia ora, councillors. I'll just introduce the report on the forestry report. So the report was created through collaboration between the strategy and growth teams and the open spaces teams. And I have Georgia with me that will help answer any questions later on. In summary, the report provides a the background information on 4 forestry blocks which are owned or administered by council. And it also provides the proposed management options for the future. It also highlights the key risks and rationale for our decision making. And excuse me, to date, the blocks have been managed largely on an ad hoc basis. And over the past few years, open spaces have assumed this, and will continue to do so in the future. The forestry block plan, which is also attached to the report, that has been developed to provide a clear direction for future management of these spaces. Valley Road, that's 3.8 hectares. That's currently being harvested. I'm sure everyone's aware of that. And what we're proposing to do there is to actually replant it in natives once the pines have been removed completely. The reason for that is to avoid council having to pay the New Zealand units, which comes out of the emissions trading schemes. Establishing notice is also cheaper than having to pay those NZUs. Mangamati in Galatea, that's about 17 hectares in extent. That was vested in council by the Crown, and has been gazetted for soil conservation and river control purposes. So that's due for harvesting in 2027. And what we're proposing there is that following harvesting, that the area be replanted in natives, and then we revert that area back to the Crown. It adjoins the Uraweras, the Uraweras as well. So how that reversion happens, that'll be investigated further in the future, if that's the way we go. We have the other block is Eagles Hill in Waimana. It's a small 0.8 hectare area. That was harvested back in 2023. And what we're aiming to do there is actually replant that area, also back in natives, native revegetation through partnerships and grants. Onapu, that's our largest block of 30 hectares. It's got 6-year-old pines on it at the moment, and they're due for harvest in 2044. So we'll continue to manage this block in the interim and until then, and then, however, a decision will need to be made on the next steps regarding that block, I think, by the council at that time. It's still a way down the track. In the interim, we'll also look at investigating some recreational opportunities within that block as well. So that's just a bit of a summary of the report. So I'll hand it back to you, Mr. Chairman. Happy to take any questions if there are.
Thank you, Ian. Questions or clarification? Councillor Isles.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Ian, for that report. Just with regards to harvesting that's taking place now on Valley Road, you recall a couple of years ago there we had a weather event which literally caused a lot of flooding in that vicinity. Mm-hmm. How are we as a council going to mitigate against that with respect to the slash that's left behind from the falling of those trees? I mean, we've been quick enough to ridicule private forestry owners for the mess that they leave behind, and we're also very much aware of the disaster it caused down in the East Coast in the flooding there last winter. So what's our process going forward? Because it does concern me that there's going to be one hell of a lot left on that escarpment.
Yes. Mr. Chair, through you, we are working with Regional Council and, in terms of the consent for that area, and we're meeting their requirements for managing slash. With the helicopter operation that you've seen as well, is it's taken a lot of the trees out. What they'll be doing as well is afterwards they'll be going in there with a grapple and actually picking up a lot of that slash and taking it down, to the lower reserve areas, and we'll be looking at chipping it as well. So we are working with Regional Council in terms of the requirements around slash management. To mitigate against those issues.
Thank you.
Councillor Jukes, followed by Councillor Tansos and then Deputy Mayor Amick.
Thank you. I actually also had a question about the slash, so thanks, Councillor Miles. But my other question was, what sort of revenue are we going to be getting from the harvesting of those pine trees?
Of Valley Road?
Or?
Yeah.
Yeah, I could answer that. We don't know until we've completed the harvest and we've determined the value of the timber that has been felled. So at this point, we can't say.
Councillor Tansos.
Thank you. My question's kind of related to that. And first of all, thanks for the report. I think it's good to actually have a plan for these little pockets that we've got. So I think I saw it seems likely that the Valley Road is going to, and I guess because of the helicopter, is going to cost more than we get. Onepu in 2044 may have a return. The Mangamate seems like it may have a return. Are we expecting that across, particularly the three, not Onepu, but the other three, that it'll kind of be more or less cost neutral? Is that what we're expecting?
Mr. Chair, again through you, the Eagle Hill was cost neutral. That right. Was harvested back in 2023. So
right.
With Mangamati, with both Mangamati and with Onepu, we're expecting that the significant revenue to the council from the harvesting of those. Yeah. They'll be pretty straightforward harvesting operations because of the location.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, Deputy Mayor Amick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, Ian and Georgia. Thanks for the report. So we've got cost of harvesting, cost of native replanting, and there's going to be perhaps some associated legal costs in that when we give it back to the Crown. Will these all be, as the harvest costs in the budget now, and will we cost in future budgets? Because I assume we're going to have to maintain the native replantings and things like that.
Is this for Mangamati?
Oh, well, I've kind of got them for, there's one on each of those, yeah.
For Valley Road, the planting of natives, because we're harvesting now, we'd have to pay NZ units under the emissions trading scheme. So what we've looked at, we're actually getting a rehabilitation plan drawn up at the moment. But we're estimating that the cost of replanting the natives would be cheaper than having to pay the NZUs.
Okay.
At this stage. So we're not sure what the planting costs would be, what we're looking at this moment.
The NZUs would be around $170,000.
Okay.
So planting, it's 3 hectares, planting them in natives would by far be the cheaper option, yeah. And in the long run as well, because it's then going to be amalgamated into the escarpment, we're seeing that the maintenance costs will be much lower because it's all just part of the same block then.
All right. Couple of white elephants, a few white elephants there for council, really, isn't there?
Councillor Puller.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Valley Road's been a bit of a hot topic lately. Could you just confirm that the helicopter operation is all part of the price, not an additional item, as seemed to have been inferred recently?
Yeah, it has been a change of methodology from what was originally developed in the plan for harvest. As you can appreciate, the site, the escarpment being very steep, creates a challenging environment, but unlike other forestry blocks, this is in an urban environment adjacent to an arterial route with commercial properties and houses. So in order to kind of meet the cultural and environmental requirements for the harvest, the helicopter method became the only viable option to make sure that we kind of balanced health and safety, environmental and cultural impacts.
A supplementary, if I may, Mr Chair. So originally it was going to be cost neutral. Are we bearing in mind the eye-watering cost of a helicopter? Is that still the case?
We'll anticipate that it would be a cost to council. What that cost is, we do not know yet.
Thank you.
Councillor Rangiaho.
Hi, thanks for the report. My question is most likely directed to you, Michelle, in terms of Mangamate. Inside of the report, it says to revert back to the ownership of the Crown. So I'm kind of interested in how because we've had treaty settlements around, and we also know that there are shared interests. So how does those treaty settlements give effect to those Soil Conservation and River Acts when reverting ownership back to the Crown? What does that look like?
I'm not sure, I'm not across the detail of Mangamati, but usually through the treaty settlement process, the Crown can only give back land that they have control over at that time. So if it's vested in the council, then usually, unless there's a collaboration between council and those Crown entities, they don't tend to hand back land to iwi or through settlement. Is that what you're saying?
Well, probably because like the acts are in 1988, and we know that we've had treaty settlements in this kind of millennium. And I just thought, would there be change inside of that?
I'm not sure, to be honest.
Well, it's just teasing out a question around just the land and the ownership of the land.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Okay, goodbye.
Councillor O'Brien.
Just a couple of questions for me. In the replanting of native plants, is there a process as to who you get to replant the natives? Is there a tender process or something like that?
At this stage, what we're looking at is partnerships. We haven't quite explored that as yet, but certainly involving the community to help plant. Valley Road may be a little bit different because of the terrain. It's very steep and hazardous, but we'll address that. But certainly they will be looking at getting contractors, and possibly local contractors to actually do it.
Thank you. And secondly, if I may, Mr. Chair, the native trees that we do get, we've been out to Minginui, and they have trying to support the community with their growing native trees. Could we utilise a space like that, or that business out at Minginui to do both things, support their community and help us support their community, but also get some natives over here?
Absolutely. We certainly will look at those options, yeah.
Thank you very much. And just one more thing is just, if we're going to revert this land back to the Crown, if we're going to regrow and then revert the land, can we ask the Crown to pay for that land to be reverted? To be planted, I mean.
Yeah, so all those details will be worked through the process of what that looks like.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Tanslos, one more question.
I was just to follow up from that question, because I think I'm confused now. I had not understood that the land would be reverting to the Crown. I thought that if we didn't forest it, it would revert to the Crown. Have I misunderstood? I have misunderstood.
Yes. Yeah.
So we're going to forest it and then it will revert to the Crown?
Yes.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Well, definitely we should get them to pay for
Sorry, we've got Vanessa, our strategic property manager, who might be able to help on that one. She's just coming forward.
So that particular block of land, it was gazetted for our management, but we don't feel like it's perhaps something that we would normally manage, those soil and river control parcels. So the process would be to go back through LINZ and DOC and ask if it should be more appropriately managed by somebody else. And so there's a statutory process that we'd run through with that. No, sorry, this is Mangamate. So that's the section that we're talking about. In the future, we may not retain management of that rather than Valley Road.
No more questions. Okay, so on page 43, the motion is, or the recommendation is that the Whakaari District Council Plantation Forestry Block Report be received by the Living Together Committee. Number 2, that the Living Together Committee approve the Whakaari District Council Plantation Forestry Block Plan. Is there a mover for that? Thank you. Councillor Isles, seconded by Councillor Boynton. Any debate? I just want to say how great it is we're thinking of putting it back to native forests. You know, the huge benefits to not only leaving pockets of native bush for our grandkids, but also the birds and the wildlife and all that sort of stuff. So I think it's a great idea. Anyone else? Councillor Isles.
Thank you, Chair. Again, I'd like to just reiterate those thoughts, but also would we be planting natives that are local to that particular area, i.e. Waimana would get whatever. And secondly, with the regional council requirements that you indicated earlier, Ian, and again, to the helicopters that we need to harvest, we're also in the process of doing a harvest on a private property on Taniatua Road at the moment, on Dennis Lawn's farm, and they're having to use helicopters there. So again, when it comes back to the consents that are being issued, again, with regards to waterways, are they also now considering, I know it's a bit of a diversion from the topic, but it's part and parcel of it, going forward, the planting of these forests? You indicate with Valley Road, the steepness of the terrain, indicating that we need helicopters to remove. Is that part of the plan going forward that Regional Council look at when they issue consent for planting some of this more unsuitable land for forest, when it comes to harvesting, the implications that it has on public safety, etc., etc.?
Sorry, Councillor, I don't quite follow you.
My question is, do we have a rapport with Regional Council over the consenting process for planting? Because again, when we would have planted Valley Road, we knew we were planting steep terrain, and we knew to harvest it, we weren't just going to be able to put the saw through it and chop the things down, that it would involve helicopters. And also, as I'm saying, on a private property in Taniatua at the moment, we're on a stop-go process with on the roading network because of the helicopters having to remove those trees. We've also seen the problems or the implications of the slash on forestry close to rivers and streams and what it's done. Do we have that sort of insight with Regional Council on their consenting or their planning process going forward?
Mr. Chairman, through you, with Valley Road, those trees are 43 years old, so
yes,
they've been there a long, long time. So I'm not sure what sort of consenting processes were in place at that stage. But certainly from our point of view, that's why we're not, because of this terrain, we're not going to look at replanting. But I'm sure that Regional Council will take those sorts of things into consideration in terms of location. If it's out in a rural area, I don't think it's an issue. But if it's in an urban area like ours, then there certainly would be some restrictions there.
Well, it has proved that it's also an issue in the rural sector.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Bridges, the culverts that's taken out with the slash. So that's what I'm saying. Are we in dialogue with Regional Council with regards? I realise it was planted 43 years ago, but there is plantings going on from this day on.
No, we certainly are. Okay. Certainly are, and with the harvesting as well, as I mentioned, that we're working closely with them. We actually had to have consent to harvest as well, So
Yeah.
we're working with them in terms of, the requirements around slash management.
So I guess that's what that turns the possible profit around, doesn't it? When you've got to use a helicopter to harvest, something that would have been thought through 43 years ago. Thank you.
So the recommendations to receive and to approve the Whakatane District Council Plantation Forestry Block have been moved by Councillor Isles and seconded by Councillor Boynton. All in favour say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you very much, everyone, and that's the finish of our public inclusive section of our meeting today. We are now going to move into public excluded. Could I have someone move that we go into public excluded, please? Deputy Mayor Imick, seconded by Councillor Jukes. All in favour say aye. Against? Carried. We'll just wait until Charisse does what she has to. Okay, folks. So we're going to restate the following resolutions that were moved and public excluded and approved. Number 1, that the Tourism Bay of Plenty report be received, and number 2, that the Living Together Committee confirms that the report will be released to the public on the Chief Executive's approval. So at this state, we're going to close the meeting. Thank you all for attending, and Deputy Mayor Emick, could you please close the meeting with karakia?
Thank you, Mr Chair. Kia whakariria te tapu, kia wā te ai te ara, kia tūriki whakataka ai, kia tūriki whakataka ai, haumi e, hui e, tae ki e.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson, for all your questions and participation in the meeting. We really enjoyed all your statements. Thank you. Hope you come back to us soon in person.